I remember the day I decided to leave home like it just happened. Not because I hated them, but because I was done trying to prove myself to people who were never going to believe in me anyway. My family wasn't poor, but they weren't rich either. My dad was old school, the kind of man who believed sons were made to lead and daughters were meant to marry stable men. My mom loved us in her own way, but she only seemed proud of the ones she could show off. My older brother Matthew was an engineer. My sister Kelly worked at a bank. And me, Riley, I was the youngest, the dreamer, the one obsessed with media and design. To them, I was just the kid with a busted laptop and no clue how the real world worked. The moment I told them, I'm leaving. I want to build my own career. I don't want to rely on anyone anymore. They didn't even take a second to pretend they were proud. My dad scoffed. My mom shook her head like I'd just declared I was moving to the moon. Matthew laughed from the couch. You won't last 3 months out there, Riley. It's the real world, not your artsy fairy tale. Kelly sipped her wine, added with a smirk. You know, not every dream becomes a business. Some dreams just stay delusional. I held it together. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. But something inside me burned so hot it made my fingers tremble. It wasn't anger. It was disappointment. They weren't even curious, just dismissive. The night I packed my things, they threw me a farewell dinner, if you could call it that. It was more like a roast. Matthew gave me an old broken suitcase and said, For your journey into the wilderness, you'll be back by fall. My mom laughed. Do you even know how to cook a real meal? Out there, no one's going to clean up after you. I kept my mouth shut. Every insult, every jab, they'd already said enough, and I had nothing left to prove. I just needed to leave. Chimiti. My first apartment wasn't even an apartment. It was a room in a moldy old building on the edge of the city. The walls leaked during storms, the radiator didn't work, and I shared the floor with someone who worked nights at a coffee shop and smoked too much. I worked the graveyard shift at a 24/7 diner and took online courses in digital media and design during the day. I barely slept. I lived off ramen, cereal, and leftover tips. And every time I thought about quitting, every time my eyes blurred staring at my glitchy screen, I remembered the sound of Matthew laughing. I still remember the worst night, about 8 months in. A client ghosted me after I delivered 70% of the project. My laptop keyboard short-circuited, and a customer at the diner screamed at me for mixing up their burger. I went home and collapsed on the kitchen floor. I cried, real, ugly sobs. And for the first time I whispered, maybe they were right. Maybe I am just some sad joke. That night, just before sunrise, Mr. Stanley came into the diner. He always sat in the far corner, always ordered black coffee, no sugar, quiet man, wore the same coat every time. He looked at me a long moment and asked, Your eyes are red, Riley. You okay? I smiled weakly. Just tired, sir. He nodded but didn't say more until a week later. He handed me a small business card with his name on it. Stanley Everett, former founder, Orion Creative, consultant, investor. He looked me straight in the eye. I've seen 100 wannabes. But you? You've got fire. You just need someone to fan it. I can teach you, but I won't pay you. You'll learn, or you'll quit. Your call. I didn't even blink. I said yes. That moment changed everything. Every lunch break, every day off, I shadowed him. Learned everything: design systems, branding, pitching to clients, marketing strategy, even how to fake confidence in a room full of doubters. He didn't coddle me. He pushed me harder than anyone ever had. And I loved it. He never mentioned my past, never asked about my family, never made me explain the hunger in my eyes. He just said, You've got one shot. Make it worth the fall. And I did. This was the beginning of my second life. The one I didn't owe to anyone. Not to Matthew, not to Kelly, not to my parents, just to me. I didn't need their permission. I just needed the fire to keep going. Working under Mr. Stanley was like being thrown into a storm and learning to dance with the thunder. He never sugarcoated anything. Clients don't care about effort, he said. They care about impact. You want to be taken seriously? Build something so good they have no choice but to notice. And most of all, the best revenge isn't loud. It's when they realize too late that they never saw you coming. That quote stuck with me more than I realized at the time. For the next 3 years, I became invisible to the world, but sharper, faster, smarter. I worked on every project I could touch, no matter how small. Logos for startups, social media strategy for local restaurants, branding decks for tiny nonprofits. I took notes, studied people, watched how big players moved. I built a portfolio in silence, pixel by pixel, project by project. I stopped posting on personal accounts. I used a new name, Riley Quinn, my mother's maiden name, one she never spoke of because it sounded too plain. But to me, it was perfect, clean, unrecognizable, unattached. By my fourth year, I had savings. By my fifth, I had my own LLC. And by the sixth, I had my first office, a single glass-walled room in a co-working space that overlooked downtown. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I called it Nova Hive Media because even bees build empires in silence. Mr. Stanley passed away the same year. It was quiet, unexpected. He left behind no family, no will, just a single envelope with my name on it, handwritten. Inside was a check, a list of contacts, and a note. Now you build your own storm. I cried the hardest I ever had that day, not because I lost a mentor, but because I realized I had become everything they said I couldn't, but I didn't call home. I didn't send an update. I didn't need their validation anymore. Nova Hive grew like a wildfire no one saw coming. I found small brands that were being ignored, underrepresented. I offered full-stack content, identity, design, strategy, digital campaigns, clean work, loud results. My secret weapon? I understood rejection. I knew how to make something undeniable. In our third year, we went viral. A campaign I directed for a small eco-candle brand exploded on social media. Within 2 weeks, it got picked up by national media. We tripled their sales in 1 quarter. Suddenly, Nova Hive was flooded with requests. And that's when I did something bold. I went regional, expanding into multiple cities, hiring teams to work remotely. I never made public appearances. I stayed behind the brand, no LinkedIn, no photo, just R. Quinn, founder and creative director. And that's when irony knocked on my door, dressed in desperation. One afternoon, my assistant forwarded me a stack of new applications. We were hiring for a project management team, customer service leads, and junior creatives. I almost laughed when I saw the names: Matthew Bennett, Kelly Bennett. Even my father, Thomas Bennett, had submitted a resume under a new email. Apparently, the tech firm Matthew worked for had collapsed after a messy lawsuit. Kelly had been laid off during budget cuts. Dad had retired early, and found out too late that the pension wasn't what he thought it'd be. They all applied, without realizing whose company it was. Because to them, Riley Bennett had disappeared. And Riley Quinn was just a faceless success story they'd probably scrolled past on LinkedIn ads. My first instinct was to reject all of them. Cold, fast, clean. But then I remembered Stanley's words. Let them walk through the door. Let them learn. So I invited them in, through HR, through normal procedures, like any stranger. Matthew showed up in a wrinkled shirt and spoke with too much pride, despite applying for a junior operations role. Kelly tried to name-drop old contacts, bragged about her Excel certifications, unaware she was being quietly observed. Dad was more reserved, nervous. He'd applied for a simple data entry position. None of them recognized my assistant, or the office space, or the brand I'd built, and not one of them ever said, "My sister used to dream of something like this," because to them, I was still just a girl who left and failed somewhere else. Shem. They got the jobs, all of them, on probationary terms, just like everyone else. Minimum wage, entry level, no shortcuts. I didn't show up on their first day. In fact, I didn't show up for 3 weeks. I watched from the top floor, through one-way glass and project updates. I watched as Matthew struggled to take orders from a woman younger than him. As Kelly rolled her eyes at meaningless tasks like scheduling meetings or writing reports. As Dad quietly tried to stay out of the way, still too proud to admit he needed this job. And I waited. Because sometimes revenge isn't a grand slam. Sometimes it's a slow realization, whispered across cubicles, built between broken egos. 3 weeks. That's how long I let them settle in. 3 weeks of watching them clock in and out, of hearing their names mentioned in meetings, of reviewing performance notes through department leads. Matthew was already clashing with his supervisor, demanding to be promoted before proving anything. Kelly kept trying to insert herself into high-level decisions, pitching old-fashioned ideas and getting frustrated when no one responded. My father was quiet, distant. He kept to himself and did his tasks carefully, as if he was trying not to be noticed at all. No one had recognized anything. Not my voice, not my name, not even the B logo that sat on every corner of the Nova Hive building. Maybe they hadn't wanted to. Maybe it was easier to believe I'd vanished, failed quietly, disappeared from their perfect world. But I was here, and I was done hiding. It was the quarterly all-hands meeting. We held them every 3 months, a full staff gathering in our large glass conference hall. Dozens of team members would attend in person, and the rest would tune in remotely. It was a chance for the founder to update the company. Except this time, it wasn't just about performance reports or projections. This time, it was personal. The room filled slowly. There were polite greetings, coffee cups, phones buzzing, laptops opening. Kelly walked in, arm full of notes, whispering something to a coworker. Matthew followed, looking distracted, clearly annoyed that he had to attend. My father entered last, head low, eyes scanning for an empty chair near the back. No one knew what was coming. My assistant Joy stepped up to the microphone. Thank you all for being here. This quarter's update will be delivered by our founder and CEO, R. Quinn. Please welcome Riley Quinn. A pause. Then the doors opened, and I walked in. Silence. I didn't need to speak right away. I let the air shift, let the room process. Kelly blinked, confused. Matthew leaned forward, jaw slack. My father went pale. And still, I didn't look at them. I walked to the front with calm, deliberate steps, stood behind the podium, and finally said, "Thank you for showing up, on time, prepared, and ready to grow. That's what I value at Nova Hive. Discipline, creativity, accountability. Not where you come from, not who you know, but who you choose to be, especially when no one is watching." I could feel their stares. Some of you may know me as R. Quinn. Some may have heard the rumors. Others may have worked beside me without ever realizing who signs your checks. A few chuckles in the room, nervous ones. Then I smiled, cool, slow. My full name is Riley Bennett Quinn. I looked straight at Kelly, then Matthew, then my father. None of them moved. Years ago, I left a home where dreaming was laughed at, where independence was seen as rebellion and believing in yourself meant you were naive. My voice never cracked. I was told I wouldn't make it 3 months on my own. I glanced at Matthew. He couldn't look at me. I was told the world wasn't kind to girls with laptops and ambition. Kelly's hands tightened around her pen, and I was given a broken suitcase to take with me. My father closed his eyes. His shoulders dropped. But I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I just walked out. And I built this. A long pause, then, Nova Hive Media, the company you now work for. Gasps from across the room. A few people turned to look at my family, whispering, "You didn't know it was me. That's okay. You didn't recognize the name, the logo, the leadership style, maybe because you never cared to see me the first time." I wasn't angry. I wasn't gloating. I was calm, like ice before it cracks. You are here now because you earned your spot, just like everyone else. You were hired fairly, evaluated fairly, and you will stay or leave by those same standards. Then I looked directly at the three of them, one last time. But understand this, I am no longer the girl who needed your approval. I am the woman who signs your checks. Silence. Not one word from them. Just three people shrinking in their chairs, surrounded by stunned employees who suddenly realized this wasn't just a company story, it was a personal reckoning. After the meeting, I walked out. Joy followed me to the elevator. "Do you want us to terminate them?" she asked gently. I shook my head. "No. Let them stay." She tilted her head, surprised. "Why?" And I said, "Because I want them to wake up every morning, knowing whose company they work for. That's a much better lesson than any firing could give." That evening, I stayed late, watching the city lights blink through my office window. I imagined Matthew sitting at his desk, humiliated but still too proud to quit. I imagined Kelly trying to explain herself, her face burning as rumors spread. I imagined my father realizing this building, these people, this company were all built by the daughter he never believed in. I didn't need revenge. I had already won. The Monday after the meeting was quiet. No one dared say a word to me directly, not even Joy, who usually dropped in to give me updates with her usual playful sarcasm. She just sent a text. "They're here, they haven't said a word, thought you'd want to know." I didn't reply. Let them stew. Let them process the truth not just of who I was, but who I had become without them. That week, my father sent me an email. Subject, thank you. 4 sentences, no apology, no questions, no acknowledgement of the past, just a flat line of gratitude as if I'd offered him a job, not a lifeline after years of mockery. I archived the email without replying. Matthew tried to act unaffected. I saw him in the break room later that week, laughing too loudly with coworkers, pretending like everything was fine, but he'd lost his edge. His voice was quieter in meetings, his emails more formal. Kelly was different. She avoided me completely. No eye contact, no greetings, just stiff professionalism like she was working for a ghost she couldn't escape. That was fine. I wasn't looking for a confession, but someone else was. It happened on a Thursday evening. The office had mostly cleared out. I was sitting in my glass-walled corner suite, reviewing a pitch deck when Joy buzzed in. "There's someone here to see you. Says she's your mother." I froze. I hadn't seen her in years. Not since that farewell dinner where she laughed while handing me a ripped suitcase and said, "Come back when the world breaks you." I almost told Joy to send her away. But then I remembered something Mr. Stanley once said. Sometimes letting them speak is how you keep control. You don't have to answer. You just have to listen and let the silence teach them. I told Joy to let her in. My mother looked older, not just in years, but in weight, the kind that clings to you when regret finally catches up. Her hair was tied back tightly, the same way it always was when she was trying to stay composed. She wore a beige coat, the kind she'd once told me was for grown women who didn't need approval. She stepped into the office slowly. Her eyes swept the space, clean, high ceilings, success bleeding from every corner. And then she saw me. "Baby," she said. That one word nearly shattered me. I hadn't heard it in a decade, not since before she started calling me unrealistic, not since before I became the daughter who was too sensitive, too dramatic, too stubborn for her own good. I didn't stand. I didn't smile. I just nodded to the chair across from me. She sat down. I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know it was you." I kept my gaze level. "That's the point, Mom. You never cared to know." She swallowed hard. "We thought you'd call when you were ready. We thought maybe you'd realize—" "What? That you were right," I said? "That I needed to come crawling back and admit I was a failure?" "No," she said quickly. "I didn't mean it like that." I leaned forward slightly. "You gave my inheritance to Matthew. You told everyone I left the family. You laughed when I said I'd make it. And now, you're here, in my building, working under my name." She looked down, ashamed. "I didn't come here to ask for anything. I needed to see you, to say I'm proud." That word stung. Where was proud when I needed help paying rent? When I was eating cereal for dinner? When I was crying over rejections in a room with no heat? "You're proud now?" I said. "Because I made something you can't ignore?" "I'm sorry," she whispered. I waited. It took her a moment, but she met my eyes again. "I was wrong. About you. About everything. And I don't expect you to forgive me. I just hope maybe we can talk when you're ready." And then she stood, didn't hug me, didn't beg, just walked toward the door. But before she left, she turned back and said the softest thing I've ever heard from her. "You built something beautiful, Riley. I hope you know that." And then she was gone. That night, I sat in my office long after the lights turned off. I didn't cry, but I didn't feel victorious either. I felt tired. Forgiveness isn't easy when the wound never fully healed, when the people who were supposed to protect you became the first ones to break you. But I wasn't a child anymore. I didn't need her to kneel. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting with HR. "We're rolling out a new probationary structure," I said. "All new hires, including family members, will be under review for 90 days. Performance-based, no exceptions." Joy raised an eyebrow. "Even your own family?" I nodded, especially them. Because now they weren't family in the way they used to be. Now, they were employees. And this time, I held the power. 3 weeks passed. They came to work on time. Did their tasks. Stayed quiet. Matthew stopped arguing in meetings. He no longer rolled his eyes when corrected. He started listening, actually listening to his supervisor, who was 10 years younger than him. I could tell it humbled him. Kelly worked late almost every evening. I noticed her ideas started shifting, less about power, more about people. She still looked down when she passed me in the hallway, but once I caught her smiling at a junior designer struggling with a color layout. She helped him, patiently. That was new. And my father, he was always first to arrive. Sat at his desk with a thermos of coffee and typed slowly, carefully. He never spoke unless spoken to, never asked for favors, never asked for more. They weren't perfect, but they were trying. And maybe, just maybe, that's all I'd wanted all along. Not an apology, just effort. On the final day of their 90-day probation, I called a meeting in the smaller West Wing conference room, far from the floor-to-ceiling windows, far from the spotlight. Just me, them, and the silence that now felt more familiar than any family dinner we ever had. They entered quietly. Matthew nodded. Kelly clutched a notebook. My father looked tired, but calm. I didn't start with numbers, no charts, no performance graphs, just truth. When I left home, I said softly, I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted to find myself. They didn't interrupt, but every step I took, I heard your voices in the back of my mind. Not cheering, not encouraging, just laughing. I paused, let it land. And when I made it, I thought maybe, just maybe, you'd find your way back to me. Not out of desperation, but because you finally saw me. I looked at each of them. Instead, you found this place when you needed a paycheck. And I let you in, not because I needed you, but because I needed me to be better than the way you left me. Still silence. And you know what? I added, voice steady, strong. You stayed, you showed up, you worked, no shortcuts, no special treatment. That means something. Matthew's lips tightened, but he said nothing. So here's what I'm offering, I continued. Matthew, permanent status, entry-level ops, with a mentor path if you're willing to start from scratch. Kelly, you're moving to strategy, but you'll answer to someone 10 years younger, and you will treat her with respect. Dad, your contract renews, but we'll talk retirement support. Realistic, not emotional. My father nodded, quietly. I stood. This building isn't just my company. It's the home I had to build when you told me I wasn't welcome in yours. And now, you're welcome here. But only if you keep earning it. Kelly's eyes welled up. She didn't speak, but she whispered something as she left. Thank you. Matthew paused by the door, then muttered, I was wrong. About everything. And my father? He simply said, You turned out better than I ever deserved. That night, I went home to my apartment, the one I bought with my own hands, my own mind, my own name. A letter waited on my doorstep, handwritten, from my mother. I saw the meeting recordings it read. I heard every word you said. I cried through all of it, not because you were cruel, but because you weren't. You could have crushed them, but you didn't. That strength I never taught you, because I didn't have it myself. I don't know if you'll ever want to sit across from me again, but if you do, there will be a plate at my table. No conditions, no judgment, just a plate for my daughter. Love, Mom. I sat with that letter in my lap for a long time. Forgiveness isn't a finish line. It's not something you cross when people finally earn it. It's something you choose when you're ready to carry less weight. And for the first time in years, I felt light. The next morning, I walked through my office not as someone proving a point, but as someone simply doing what she loved. I didn't need revenge anymore. I had purpose. I had peace. And they worked for me now, not out of punishment, but as proof that I survived. I didn't close the door on them. I just let them walk through it on their own.